Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Janyre Tromp. Janyre, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I am super excited you're here, and I know we're going to have a fabulous conversation because I so wish I had hit record before we had started. They're just having a great conversation leading into this. So let's start with, how did you get into writing?
So I think every writer has kind of a unique, weird path into writing. I know there's very few of us that this is exactly what everybody thinks happens as writers. So I actually started school as a chemistry major, college. And one day I got to the point where I hated the labs. And if anybody knows in the sciences, labs are kind of your saving grace. So I called my mom and I'm like, "Mom, I don't know what to do." And she says, "Well, Janyre, just do what you love for a little while." And I was 17 in my freshman year. I was young, whatever. Anyways, in my all of my 17-year-old wisdom, I said to my mom, and I quote, "Nobody gets paid to read, Mom." Well, the great irony is that I'm an ad book editor. That's my day job. And I pretty much get paid to read. And so I'm in my day job. I'm young. I think I was like 22 at the time, 23 maybe. And my boss says to me, "You are a very intuitive editor. Have you ever thought about writing your stories down?" Because I'm always telling stories. And I said, "You want me to do what now?" Because I had never, that was not a dream of mine. I was not that kid that dreamed of being a writer. I wasn't in the writing clubs at school because remember, I was going to be a scientist, you guys, right? So I was like, that actually kind of sounds like fun. And so I started writing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yet again, kindred spirit. I feel like we were so similar because I went to school with I had initially thought I was going to be a math major. Then calculus and I met, and we were not going to work out. And so when I realized that that relationship wasn't going to happen, I declared a major to my parents every month until I declared to the school the one time I was supposed to. And I ended up declaring communications, journalism, but I had to work through different parts and pieces. And, you know, to me, communications was opening the aperture of what I might do. So tell me, with your background, you start with the science, but that tells me that there's some element of a structuring that can happen, because I mean, there is a lot of to have the interest in chemistry, which I liked chemistry too, that you know there's an interest in structure, in processing and understanding, like how things might come together, like the blending of things. So I can see how the intuitive storytelling parallels that in a
Mhm.
sense. So could you talk a little bit more, like, how did you embrace hearing, intuitive storytelling, and intuitive editing? Because I love that. I
Yeah.
resonate a lot with that because that's how I do it too.
Yeah. So we were talking beforehand that both Jen and I write in a similar way. That's kind of a unique, although I'm finding, Jen, that more authors are similar to us than we realize. And actually found a name for it the other day. And can I come up with the name for it right now? No. But I will remember when we're not talking about it specifically, and then it'll pop into my brain, which, by the way, that was a microcosm of my brain, you guys. So my brain is firing and I am all over the place and I have all of these fantastic ideas. And Jen and I both kind of, we throw them on paper via either like voice to text on our phones or scraps of paper. I actually use Aqua Notes in the shower. Have you heard of these?
No, tell
It's
me about that.
waterproof paper and you use a pencil and it's called Aqua Notes and it comes with suction cups to stick on your shower. Their tagline is, "Don't let your good ideas don't let any more good ideas go down the drain,
I
which I
love that.
and so you can write, like, when you're taking a shower, that's when all the good ideas hit, and then you can, like, write it down, and then it, like, has a perforation so you can tear it off and take it with you when you go. And by the way, um, I have an iPhone, and I don't know about you, but voice to text on my, like, notes app is muy not good.
Yes, and when I do that, I will still voice it, but what happens is if I don't go back and fix it quickly, then there are times when I thought it captured everything, and then I've emailed it to myself, and maybe a day or so later, I look at it and went, "Oh, that's gibberish.
I
What was I
I
trying to say to myself?"
I have a free fix for you, Jen. I have a free fix for you. It's an app, it's free, it's called Cocoon Weaver. Cocoon Weaver, like a butterfly. Cocoon and then weaver, like, I don't know. Anyway, it is free and it does the dictation, voice to text, but it keeps your recording, keeps your voice recording.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Okay.
so it
Oh,
you because we all know that it's not awesome. So then we have all of these scraps that we're trying to deal with. And then what do you do? You know? And that's such a hard thing. I'm actually in that right now with the book that I'm currently writing. Um, I, and Jen, we were talking beforehand that I am, as a writer, I am my editor's self's worst nightmare because I am disorganized. I have I I have things flying all over the place. I have story threads and character arcs, and I all of my books, we I use a lot of legend and myth, and I bend things in, and then I forget that I'm supposed to be doing that. Uh, right? And so yeah, so I have all of these random things out there. And you were talking about science, and it's like we have all of these lovely things that you can play with out there, but if you mix, your acid is, 100% acid instead of 10% acid that you put in, bad things happen. Just saying. I actually saw this happen in the lab. It was pretty bad. Where, like, we had to shove somebody into the chemical showers that you're all like, "Oh, you'll never see it." Yeah. Mm.
oh,
Somebody went a chemical shower in my freshman inorganic chem class because she mixed too high of a level of acid in.
but in the same point, oh my gosh, I feel for her. But to your point about the idea of the lab is a place for experimenting with things. And if we put it in the context of writing, you're when you are creating a story arc, when you are creating, a character piece or you're creating a myth and you are blending, there is an element of experimenting. Have I put too much of this? Do I need to back off of this? And when you're writing, I don't when I write, I tend to just cut to the chase in a sense. I just write very quickly what my thought is. And then, so it's probably like the idea of this little stick man. It might be in my head, this fantastic, crazy, amazing way. But what comes out is almost like this little stick guy going, "Hey." And I have to kind of weave in and out pieces and then take time away and read it again and go, I put too much here, or I didn't add enough here, and back off and come back in a few times versus saying, well, I can just knock it all out. I can do that with smaller pieces, but books, for instance, it doesn't matter what type of book. It matters that it is a book. And I want to be able to put those pieces together so that it flows, it has organization, but I'm not organizing the book completely until I see a lot more of it come together. In my head, I know where it wants to go, but I don't plot it and I don't really pants it completely. I kind of, like we were talking ahead of time, like you do, straddle that piece and really immerse in my writing, and it feels a lot more intuitive despite the fact that I could write some pieces very quickly. I That doesn't mean they're really good. It just means it got out of my head a little bit faster to work with.
Yes. And I remembered what we're called, puzzlers, because
Ah,
we create these individual puzzle pieces, and then we have to figure out how to put them together. And so one of the tools that I have learned as an editor that has been enormously helpful for me as a writer, and all of the really creative people out there in the world are going to gasp and just give me a second to explain myself. But this tool is called an outline. I hate outlines. I hate outlines. But you guys, one of the things that Jen was just saying that's super important, if you noticed, she goes in and edits multiple times. And it's really, really, really important to do your edits in order. Because if you go in and you've got that little stick figure and you put this beautiful shirt on them, and then you move on, and then you come back and you realize that, he's missing an arm, it might change the shape of your shirt or the color of your shirt or all of these things, right? And so you have to make sure that your stick figure is actually a figure, that it actually works together. And the only way to do that in a bigger piece is an outline. And I'm a very intuitive editor
me too.
of other people's stuff because I have enough distance to be able, as I'm reading, to see that structure and, are they missing an arm? Are they missing, their thumb? The smaller things. But when you're in it as an author, you guys, I have been editing for 20 years. I can't do it without an outline. I on my own stuff. I make an outline. When you do it is up to you. If you're a plotter, you do your outline ahead of time, but I guarantee you probably have changes by the end. Go ahead and change the outline because then you have that, 20,000-foot view on it and you can see any problems that you may have missed as you were actually writing it. If you're a pantser, for the love of all that is holy, please make an outline after you're done. If you're a puzzler like I am, I write I write to like the 3/4 mark and then I make an outline.
Mhm.
Because then I can figure out what needs to happen at the end. And I tend to write, a lot of my pre-writing stuff and where I get my puzzle pieces is like character work, like backstory and why would they do this and trying to figure and I write historical. So I'm trying to pull pieces together of history into the actual storyline. So my book, Shadows in the Mind's Eye, which is right here, Shadows in the Mind's Eye, that has a lot of history of there's this tiny town in Arkansas. It's called Hot Springs, Arkansas. Hang on a minute, history geek alert. But there's this tiny town called Hot Springs, Arkansas, and just in the early 20th century to mid 20th century, it was the largest illegal gambling site in the nation. Like, all of the mobsters from Chicago and New York would come and vacation there.
Did not know that.
It was insane, and that's where the book is set, right? So I've got all this crazy cool history of these people coming and going and, like, in the world that's going on, and so I wanted to pull all of these pieces in, but I had to be very careful not to have it overtake the story, right? And so having that outline and knowing what's important and when things flow in and out and moving around is really, really important because I was also working in Frankenstein's monster into this story because I do myth and legend. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's important to have those structures to make sure that you are playing with the details properly as you're weaving them in and out. And you can see that when you do kind of an annotated outline of your book. If you use Scrivener, it's super easy because Scrivener in the and built into the program You can do little summaries for your chapter and your scenes right there inside Scrivener. Word is a little more difficult. I have some friends that are using Chat GPT to get at least like you take the whole chapter, copy and paste it into Chat GPT and have it give you a summary. They're really awful, but it's not a blank page. Do you know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
as writers, we all hate blank pages. That's really, really hard to overcome. Just be careful with Chat GPT because there are some legal issues in there. If you're not comfortable with it, ignore everything I just said. But then once you've got that outline done, that becomes your first edit, that developmental edit that Jen and I are that's what we do. And so once you have do you do the same thing? Do you do an outline when you edit?
When I'm like you, from an intuitive standpoint, when I'm editing somebody else's work, I'm able to read and see the structure because to your point, you said it beautifully. There's that element of space and distance. I did not write it. And my job is to help and be of service to help that writer strengthen it. So I will read it, I make notes, I see what is going on. I'll write out my own notes of going, this is what I see. So then I see there should be some build here, or I don't see enough of this by here. And I'll communicate that. And with it's if it's nonfiction, I'm looking for the transformation for the reader. There's still a transformation that's happening, whether you have a character going through something or the reader is the character because they picked up the book to solve a problem. But I'm looking for similar, parts. And so when I read, I see the outline when I'm editing somebody else's piece. Yes. When I'm doing my own edits on my own work, like, I'm working on a book right now, of my own, and I'm just in the writing stage in the context of saying, "It's not ready to take it from beginning to end, and does this still work in the flow?" Right now, I have tons of notes in various stages of size. They're various little Word documents. Some of them are a couple of sentences, some of them are like epistles, and they're all varying pieces to help this book come together. And so what I'm doing is I'll read through the notes and go, okay, what was happening in all of these? Where did I want them to go? Because what I thought they were going to be when they were downloading for me to start to work with, when I'm sitting there to work in that space, they feel a little different. So then, okay, let me just let the pieces that are coming up now and edit those. And I say edit, start putting together what I think that chapter ought to be, writing in what I need. Maybe I'm editing in the context of looking at other notes and going, no, you don't need to go in quite yet. So to your point, puzzling that chapter together. And then when I think I've reached a point of going, I think this chapter's as far as I can take it right now, stop, I move to the next chapter. It's not written in order. This book is not being written in any order. I know the order that I want it to go in. I know the structure. So the outline of, I know I want this reader, it's going to be a nonfiction. So they have to start with this is, I understand you have this, you have a goal. This book is a part of that solution. Da, 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 da. By the end, there should be a feeling of solution. There should be, even if that transformation is a mindset shift, that's accomplished that job. If it's the mindset shift and there's some actionable things that reader can take away and go do, it's done its job. So I know the structure, the big picture vision, the little skeleton, the little outline, my little stick man has all of his little parts. I know where they need to go. However, to your point of, did I get all of his like fingers? Do I have all, four fingers and a thumb? I think, but I'm not there yet because the chapter hasn't been fleshed out. So it's kind of like that ebb and flow. But right now, I'm not willing to. I feel like I have a little like wardrobe going along the side of my little stick person going, I think they might like this jacket and they might like this top or they might like this top. Right now, I'm going to stick over here until I figure out where it belongs and then move through the design phase of their little outfit.
Exactly, and but that's I mean, that's a great way to say it, and the way I have the separate documents, but it also will put pieces in if I'm pretty sure they're gonna go somewhere in a particular chapter, I use square brackets. So I start it with a square bracket and then paste it in and then end it with a square bracket and make it all blue so that I know this isn't permanent. This isn't exactly where I want it to go. But for the love, don't forget this because as we've already discussed, I'm not the most organized of people in my head. And so I have to put that external organization into place in order for me to be an effective writer. And one of the things that you mentioned that I love that I should have said is that reader journey is so important, no matter what you're writing.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we talk in fiction about the hero's journey, but we don't
Mhm.
hear about it as much on the nonfiction side, which I think is a mistake.
Mhm.
Um, because as humans, we are structured in a way that deals very well in story.
Mhm.
So that story arc that we talk about in fiction, if you're a nonfiction writer, go learn a little bit about that because if your nonfiction book can kind of follow that same journey that goes on a fiction book, you will knock it out of the park. And just the way the human's brain is structured, that is a very, very effective way to outline your book. So they start with a problem, then they start figuring out the problem, but then there's a bigger problem that comes, and how do you overcome that to get to the point where you wanna be? And so you start with a promise and you end with the delivery of that promise, and it may not that the delivery of the promise may not be what your reader expected at the beginning, and that's okay, but you still need to answer that need that they picked up the book for. Um, and the
Well
outline
said.
structure is all so important inside of that because otherwise you get lost in your head.
Yes. Yes. So to your point though, like when a writer is when they're working on their own piece and you know maybe they have gone through and they've outlined in some way. They've either, to your point earlier about they've they've plotted it and then they've re-verified their plot, or they pantsed it all the way and then went back and said, "Okay, does this work?" Do you think that as a writer that they can still see all of the gaps, or do you think that that's when you know they need more support to kind of get through that? Because sometimes I've heard some people say that they're not always sure when to get other people to kind of come in, whether it's a beta reader or a developmental edit or what have you. So what would you suggest? Like I've the writer, I've written my book, I've got my outline. I think I've figured out what I think are my plot holes. What do you suggest they do to kind of help further make sure that their little stick man not only has the proper outfits in the right order and they have all the parts that they need to actually go walk along the journey that they're supposed to?
So here's the thing I tell people, even editors need editors. So there is nothing I was gonna say there's nothing wrong with it's almost necessary. The language needs to be stronger than that. It's having outside people look at what you're working on. They will see the things that you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you don't it's a learning experience, and that's how I approach editing. I'm one of those weird creatures that I love being edited. Like, do you realize that you're doing this over and over and over again? No, no, I did not. That would be awful to read. I don't want to do that anymore. And so you learn. So edit if you approach editing as a learning experience, it makes it feel better because I work for a publisher. So my job is to sell to help my authors get to a point where they can sell as many books as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know an author out there that would have a problem with that. Having somebody help you sell more books? Is that yuck? No, that's amazing. Please help me sell my books, right? And so I think if we approach but then I get the other side. Well, then why do we have to edit it all, right? If somebody else has to come in and edit me, then why do I bother editing? Give yourself a leg up And if you get your book to the best that you can possibly get it, A, you're more likely to be picked up by a publisher if you wanna be traditionally published. But B, you've gotten it to a point where the editor can take it even better. So if you give a book to an editor and it's like a C minus, they might be able to get it up to a B. But if you give an editor a B or a B plus, they can get it up to an A. So there's only so much an editor can do. If we were talking about, your stick figure, um, and they can make sure that all of the parts, they can point out to you that you're missing parts, but they can't create the parts.
Right.
That's your job as an author. They can say to you, "Mm, you might want to put the backside of those pants on because nobody wants to see all that." You know what I'm saying? Like, because their backside's hanging up. And but they aren't gonna be able to create that for you. They can tell you that commas are missing, they can tell you that description is missing, they can tell you how something feels, but they cannot create that for you. And if they're stuck telling you that you have major, major issues, they can't help you polish it up and make it amazing. So give it to him is in something that is acknowledgeably not perfect, but that they don't have to do all of the rough work on first. It'll save you it'll save you money too if you're hiring your editor. If you're self-publishing, it will take an editor far less time to go through something if you've gone through it already yourself.
And to your point about the idea of being excited about editing, getting that feedback, I love that you said that you look forward to it because that shift, that's a beautiful mindset shift that if a writer's willing to do that, can truly do that, what they're doing is if you view the edits that you get back, the feedback you get back as a gift to say, this is a gift that is going to help me strengthen this experience for my reader, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's going to make it a better book. It's going to make it a better experience. And it makes me a better writer, even if I've been writing for years, even if I have so many books under my belt, even if I'm an editor and a writer or what have you. You are still honing your craft. It's almost kinda like it's like that intrinsic motivation to really have a mastery and purpose of an idea of, I continually show up, so I continually hone, and I just get better with each pass, each book, and viewing it as you have a teammate. When you really click with that person, when you really click with that editor, you can take on that feedback or your beta readers or whomever, and you can take on that feedback and view it as a gift. You're growing and strengthening your skills, which means the next pass will be even better. That next book will be even better. And you will build an even stronger relationship with that editor. Would you agree?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think you said something really interesting that I'm gonna point out, that the goal is always the reader, right? So if your goal is always to help the reader in some way, to entertain the reader if you write fiction, to help them with a problem if you're a nonfiction writer, if your goal is always to help the reader, then it doesn't matter if somebody is saying, you might want to do it this way because the goal is to help the reader. So if that's always your goal and you keep that in mind when you're writing and when you're editing, that makes it feel less personal and more strategic. I guess is a way to look at it because after all, I mean, writing is a creative process, but it's a business too. And so I go through, even though I'm a novelist, I go through and I figure out the why my readers pick up my books. Why would they want to pick up, Shadows in the Mind's Eye or Oh Little Town rather than any of the other amazing books that are out in the world? Because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of books printed every day. So if you are thinking about your reader as you're going through all of these stages, it makes the process a lot easier.
I love that so, so much. So to your point about your own pieces, when you and you write in multiple genres too. I mean, yes, there's historical fiction, but there's still elements of either multiple genres or there's a blending of genres. If a writer is kind of hung up on, well, I probably should be writing in this genre or I want it to be here. Yeah. How do you advise them to kind of get out of their own way? Or, you know, if that's really what you want, what would you advise them? Because sometimes they might think, well, I think this book is this genre. Oh, well, maybe it might not be, or you need some other things to make it that, or maybe it really would serve to blend them. What are your thoughts there?
So a couple of things. First of all, there's a few genres where there's formulas that you have to follow or your readers will hate you forever. So romance, mystery, those genres have very, very distinct formulas. And the reason that they have them is because it works. So a reader will walk into a romance expecting something. And because you are thinking about your reader and not what you want, you follow the formula because that's what your reader expects. Okay. So a lot of the genre discussion is all about what your reader is going to be looking for as they jump into a book. Right now, we are in a market where genre blends are all the rage, where there's this blend of magic into real life situations that is absolutely huge on the fiction side. We have some memoir that's blending into self help and vice versa. But there are key points in each of those genres that you need to be watching out for. How do you find those? For the love, you better be reading in your genre. You'll see patterns that happen. You'll see it, and if you write fiction, if you are like, oh wait, I write romance and I don't know the romance formula, ask the Google what the romance formula is. It is easy to find. Same with mystery. But other than that, think about your reader and what serves your reader. Okay. So if it doesn't serve your reader, if it doesn't intrigue your reader, then don't use it. One of the things, so I actually have a marketing and PR background as well as the editing side. So I actually started in my publishing company, I was running the marketing department. So my brain operates on those levels too. So if you do not have an idea of who your ideal reader is, stop writing and go figure that out. So for me, I actually advised thinking about a real person rather than creating someone. So I have a really good friend who loves literary book clubby fiction. It's not quite literary book club. Anyway, uh, but that's what she loves to read. And so I write for Tracy. Would Tracy like this? The answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, I don't do it. And that it's as simple. I mean, simple but not easy. How's that? It's as
But
simple. You find who your ideal reader is, and if it's something that works for them, then write it. And if it's something that doesn't work for them, don't write it. That said, if you're hoping to be traditionally published, traditional publishers have a whole other realm of things that they have to deal with, and they have to sell a certain number of books in order for a book to be viable. Because people like me like to feed their kids. It's my job. And if my publisher doesn't make money, I don't get paid and I don't have food for my kids. And that's a problem, right? So if you're hoping to be traditionally published, there are other considerations and you have to be much more aware of the market. If you're self publishing, you get to do whatever you want to do. But again, if you want to sell a lot of books, you have to have that ideal reader and write to that reader.
Well said. This has been so much fun, kindred spirit. That's all I keep thinking is we've been in this the whole time we've been together. I'm like, oh my gosh, kindred spirits. Dinner, where can people connect with you? Where can they get your books? How can they be more a part of your world? Because you're just fabulous.
Well, thank you. You're so sweet. So I always tell people, as long as you can spell my name, you can find me. So I am Janyre Tromp everywhere. So it's JanyreTromp. And that is my web address. If you want to go there, you can sign up for my newsletter and get a free novella called Wide Open. And it's historical. Who'd have thunk? And then I'm on Instagram. I do a lot of writer tips on Twitter. I'm even on Threads, the new one. I'm still trying to figure it out, but whatever. We're there. um, and then I also run a Facebook group. It's called Editing Insiders. So if you just go, I think it's facebook.com/groups/editing insiders. It's a place that a friend of mine and I run. We're both editors in traditional publishing houses, and we just answer questions from authors and we give tips. So it's kind of a fun place to hang out. And then for my books, I have two that are published. So I'm gonna show and tell. Yeah. So Shadows in the Mind's Eye and Oh Little Town, they are available wherever books are sold. I actually in my time feed or in my feed, my memories on Facebook, it came up that I found Shadows in the Mind's Eye for the first time in Barnes and Noble. It was like an amazing moment. So if it's not on the shelf, they can order it for you. So yeah, that's all my what I've got going on at the moment.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been absolutely fabulous, Janyre. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me hang out with you guys. Hope to see you on socials.